Welcome to another episode of Hidden History. In today's episode, we will discuss the Cabbage Patch infants, or Meadow babies, that were put on holiday postcards in the United States of America. By the 31st of January 1824, these kinds of artwork became known as the Repopulation postcards, which displayed images of the Cabbage Patch infant babies, or the Meadow babies, in Cabbage Patch fields. The extensive predictive programming and culture creation began with a painting that originated from Imperial Russia during the 13th of September 1820. The painting shows Lugovoy Malish, or Meadow babies, and was given the caption of Vot odkurta barichi deity, or that's where babies come from. And this predates the initial film of the French cinematographer known as Alice Guy Blanchet by 66 years. That created a film on the Cabbage Patch children. So this movement of Cabbage Patch babies actually began in Russia and started way before it was in the United States. In the painting from Imperial Russia that was captioned with the words Vot Akuda Barishi Deity, or that's where babies come from, this entire narrative was intended to convey how female commissionerki, or chosen United officers or commissioners, were tasked with nurturing these infants, to set in the minds of the human beings connecting the maternal parent to a clinical environment. Was this a way to indoctrinate people to believe in state control? Where did these infants come from? Were they orphans from the parents of Great Tartaria? Such paintings were funded by the Ministers' Committee of the Imperial Departments of the Royal Courts in Russia. So this meant the funding was derived from the Russian Emperor, called Alexander Pavlovich Romanov, who many knew as Alexander I and Alexander the Blessed. So the Ministers' Committee of the Imperial Departments of the Royal Court in Russia became the protectors of the parentless infants from Great Tartaria. When the first mud flood happened in 1740, vast areas of northern Russia would have been covered in silt, gravel, soil, pebbles and rocks. So were these repopulation cards related to these Cabbage Patch infants being found in the soil and gravel? A slight hint maybe. Perhaps this was a way of publicly announcing the Meadow babies, but in a concealed form. Isn't this the way it always seems to work? But why were these Meadow babies in Cabbage Patch fields? Was it so the Russian people and the American people could become used to the concept of parentless Meadow babies and just another method of social programming? Each of the repopulation postcards were produced in a French-style postcard that mostly depicted Cabbage Patch babies or Meadow babies growing in the wilds of Mother Nature. Only minimal amounts of information is known about them, but it was suggested that the Spanish Surrealist artist called Salvador Dali had an intense fascination with the repopulation postcards. In the Bordeaux exhibition of 1895, a celebratory float was paraded for the French people and was named the Chars de Naissance, or Chariots of Birth. Was this somehow meant to show how a concealed world government was in actuality wanting to have full control? Were they attempting to genetically steer the pathway of biological evolution? In 1896, you had a film called The Cabbage Fairy, created by the filmmaker Alice Guy Blanchet. She was a pioneer filmmaker who specialised in producing narrative fiction-based films. Alice Guy Blanchet was also the first woman to direct a film anywhere on planet Earth and was appointed the role, which was quite unique at this time. But maybe being a female was more suited to create films on this topic. She experimented with the chronophone of Leon Ernest Gaumont and with colour, tinting and special effects. So this was the very early days of special effects in film. In 1902, she went on to make a film called Babies in a Cabbage Patch, and for the composited photographs that became the Repopulation postcards, such as the Grain de Chaux or Cabbage Seed, and the La Ferme aux Bébés or the Farm of Babies. The exemplary Franco-British-American cinematographer known as Herbert Reginald Gaston Blanchet Bolton, with his wife Alice Guy Blanchet, set up Solax Studios with George Maget in New York City on the 15th of August 1912. Alice Guy Blanchet was the artistic director and co-founder of Solax Studios that were established in Flushing, Mist, the Queens Borough of New York City on the 28th of March 1910. On the 23rd of October 1912, the Solax company invested $100,000 for a premises in Fort Lee Borough, midst the Bergen County in eastern New Jersey, the midway location of the American film industry prior to the establishment of Hollywood in Southern California. In 1982, you had the Cabbage Patch Kid dolls, which were dolls for children. The official Cabbage Patch Kids story tells a young boy named Xavier Roberts who was led by Bunnaby through a waterfall, down a tunnel and out into a magical land where a cabbage patch grew little children. So what's the symbolism of this? Bunny Bee is the white rabbit leading the kids to a new beginning through the water, which is the waterfall, which is the cycle of life and renewal, out into a cabbage patch field where they see the newborn Cabbage Patch Kids born in cabbages. What a very surreal backstory to these Cabbage Patch dolls. When you brought the dolls, they came with a birth certificate and adoption papers and sold between $60 to $1,000. These very popular dolls sold for 20 years and then became trading cards and very popular amongst teenagers. Now, of course, there is no direct evidence to these being connected to the Repopulation cards, but there does seem to be some similarities to the stories. So what was the official reason for why these babies were shown in cabbage patches on postcards? What is the story we have been given? The official story came from French origin, and in early modern Europe, cabbages were a very common food. When a wedding took place, the largest cabbage would be taken from the field after a wedding, with the groom being the one that dug up the cabbage. It would then be taken to the couple's new home where the bride would cook it. The shape of the cabbage was seen like a womb at this time, with the leaves symbolizing fertility. So this was seen as a symbol of luck for the newly wedded couple and would bring them plenty of children. With the change in the Industrial Revolution at this time, the cabbage went from symbolizing fertility to being a newborn baby. So apparently this is how babies came to being symbolized, being grown in a cabbage patch field. And this is where babies came from. Again, what a bizarre story. With the vast number of parentless youngsters becoming part of the orphan train movement in the United States and the repurposing of numerous buildings from Great Tartaria and the Old World Empire into becoming mental institutes, insane asylums or psychiatric hospitals, was it the case that the Meadow babies or Cabbage Patch babies were a socio-cultural result of the collapse of the Tartarian civilization? Thank you for watching, everyone. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.